Today on the Fearless Future podcast, Leah Jacobson, we've got some very special guests. Who have we got today?
Yes, we do. We have the hormone geniuses coming your way today.
We are doing a very special spotlight on two of our speakers who are going to be joining us in Orlando, Florida at the Fearless Future Conference. You can learn all about that at fearlessfutureconference.com. So excited to present these women to you today. Welcome to the Fearless Future podcast, where your hosts Lisa Canning and Leah Jacobson will explore what the world would look like if women didn't fear pregnancy. Through education, community, and healthcare solutions, Guiding Star Project strives to make this a reality at our physical centers across the United States. Join us. All right, we're going to bring on these incredible ladies right now to the Fearless Future podcast. Welcome, Jamie and Teresa, the Hormone Genius podcast. Ladies, welcome.
Thank
we
you.
We are so excited to be here.
Oh my gosh. Now,
thanks for inviting
our
us.
listeners, I am sure, are very familiar with you both. But just in case people are not, will you kindly introduce yourselves? Jamie, we'll start with you.
All right. Yes. Well, my name is Jamie Rachi. I live in Iowa, married 15 years, have 4 children, and I'm just a big hormone nerd. A big hormone nerd. I have my master's degree in community health education, and that's really what turned this mild interest into a full-fledged passion when I studied fertility awareness-based methods and why doctors don't prescribe, or not even don't prescribe, but why they only prescribe birth control when women are working to avoid pregnancy and why they don't mention fertility awareness. So that's really what started opening my eyes to this work. Later became a fertility care practitioner, started a Guiding Star location in Waterloo, Iowa, and started, yes, I mean, it's bam, bam, bam. And then Teresa and I have our Hormone Genius podcast we started in 2020. And then I also run Fiat Institute, which is a training body where I train and coach women to be certified hormone coaches. So that's like really my rap sheet.
It's a good one. I like it. Teresa, over to you for anyone who might not know you and your work.
Absolutely. So I'm Teresa Kenny. I'm from Omaha, Nebraska, and I have been a women's health nurse practitioner for 25 years. Wow. I worked with Dr. Thomas Hilders at the St. Paul VI Institute for 20 years, and now work for a family practice office called Sancta Familia Medical. I am equally as nerdy and passionate about hormones as Jamie is. And because of that, one night at a dinner when Jamie and I just kind of met each other and caught up about all things hormones, I had this sense that maybe Jamie could be somebody who could be a partner in crime for just speaking hormones out as a mouthpiece to the world. And thankfully, she said yes to that. And ever since, we've had the Hormone Genius podcast since 2020. And amazingly, we are probably going to hit 1 million listens by the end of 2025.
That's incredible, ladies.
It's staggering to think about, but just in terms of like what we can kind of see and, you know, at least somebody push play and, you know, we will have 1 million listens probably by the end of 2025. So we know people care about hormones. We know people care about women's health care. And so we're going to stay in this space as long as we can.
Fantastic. And I want to really encourage all of our listeners to go and listen to the Hormone Genius podcast wherever you like to listen to podcasts. So let's just start with a little primer, so to speak. When we're saying hormones and that we want to care about our hormones, what are we talking about?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll start and then Teresa, you can finish. But I know for me, growing up and being in college and, you know, especially as you hit puberty and your body's changing and you're trying to figure it out. And sometimes our periods are really painful and sometimes they're fine. I mean, that's what I associated hormones with. I associated hormones with my cycle. More specifically, I associated hormones with my period alone. I think a lot of people do that. They just think, you know, hormones equal my period, which that is very not in ways accurate, sure, but there's so much more to hormones. And So yeah, our hormones are chemical messengers that travel through our bloodstream, telling certain organs and glands what to do. So it's like how we breathe. It's how we wake up in the morning. It's what regulates our temperature. It gives us energy. I mean, it's more than just reproduction. Teresa and I like to focus, though, on our fertility cycle as a sign of health. And so when we do our podcast, we talk about, yes, the fertility cycle, but also other aspects of hormone health that affects other systems in our body, like our gut and inflammation and our adrenals and caring about our toxic load and our thyroid. So really, there's so much to hormones than just our period. And so that's what I would say about that. But Teresa, what would you like to add?
Well, I would just say that so Jamie and I, we were just at a very big conference called Seek, and we had these backpacks that say, ask me why hormones are cool. And so I'm in Washington, D.C. right now, and I decided, well, I'll just keep wearing my backpack that says, ask me why hormones are cool. And this very nice man behind me at the airport finally said to me, hey, I'm going to ask you, why are hormones cool? And I said, I should have thought about the ramifications of wearing the backpack.
Are you ready? Do you have an answer?
So I basically said, I'm in healthcare and hormones are life. Like hormones literally are what keep us alive in every aspect. And so everyone has to care about hormones at some level because it is what makes us work on every day. And like Jamie said, it's a messenger system. And that's what's so cool. It's like, there's so many ways to talk about it, but the way I described it to this man was it's kind of like highways and interstates and the traffic system, really. It's like all these messengers constantly going all the time, if you can imagine, and somebody has to direct it. Somebody has to make sure it's not all crashing into some sort of a problem. And just like traffic can get messed up and not work right, and we can have accidents, guess what? Our hormones can too. And so a lot of the things that we try to talk about is, well, I mean, we know people out there suffer with hormonal problems, or they think they do. How can we guide them and direct them to know the pathway towards really finding the underlying reason for that problem?
Right. Yeah. And I also think, just real quick too, piggybacking off of that, Teresa, is that, as women, because we don't, and I'm generally speaking in men, but generally people don't understand the importance of our hormone system. And we see the 8-letter word of hormones as a 4-letter word. So it's like we're in a fight with our hormones all the time, but we don't see our hormones actually working for us. But really, the symptoms of hormone imbalance is our hormone, like literally our hormones are talking to us. It's giving us data about the state of our health. And that's why this podcast is so important. It's to help women befriend their hormones, listen to their hormones, get the help they need so they don't have to suffer as much as they're suffering, hopefully to ease a little bit or completely take that away. So education is power for sure.
I can't, like what you guys are saying is just so fabulous. The reframing of hormones into a positive thing. I think you hear so much about, oh, she's so hormonal, or, these sort of negative associations of like, oh, my hormones, I have hot flashes, or it's like we associate hormones with negative, like being overwhelmed emotionally or being physically whatever. And so I love what you're saying, because it is just that mindset of, I have these hormones, how do I work with them?
Mm-hmm. Can you paint the picture for somebody who might be still thinking like, oh, what's the big deal? Like, what's hormones? Paint the picture of what happens when one is living with poor hormone health and then one is living with awesome hormone health.
Man, there could be so many examples of that. I mean, I guess like if you just took, maybe let's take somebody who's postpartum. That is a particular hormonal state that's unique, because in the world of like pregnancy, we have lots of generous hormones, and we think of pregnant women as being sometimes sick at the beginning, but then they feel usually well, besides getting puffy and big and all those things, but they generally feel well. And then they deliver this baby that they have to take care of. And gosh darn it, there is a hormonal shift that occurs that it is so dramatic. And I don't think we give enough credence to this dramatic shift that occurs when a woman delivers a baby. You know, we just kind of like look at it as obviously like it's natural in a sense, but basically a woman goes from having a really generous amount of hormones to almost none.
Yep.
Almost none.
And
not
almost
only that,
immediately. It's so fast.
only immediately, but like for a prolonged period of time, many times, because she will breastfeed, which will suppress a lot of her reproductive hormones for a longer period of time. So when that doesn't go well, you know, the ramifications of that on a woman's life, which would also then, you know, ripple towards the baby, towards the father, towards the family, is huge.
Yep.
And it's huge for society, because if that woman was a working woman or in society or whatever it is, it makes a difference. If we don't care about hormones, we're not caring about like how civilization really thrives and how women thrive, but like how civilization thrives, right? Like this is all about like really helping community and helping civilization get better. So I mean, this is just a unique situation. Postpartum, you could have 1,000 examples, but we need to support women because that is a place where she needs some help. She needs some hormonal support because it's a unique situation where hormones were generous that went to nothing. And of course, Jamie and I have talked about that on our podcast with postpartum depression and postpartum issues. You know, what is the support that we can give them?
Mm-hmm. Totally.
I love personally that you picked postpartum in the lactation era as a lactation consultant. I actually had a telehealth visit today with a mom that is 2 weeks postpartum and just the first baby. And no one told her, you know, what that hormonal drop was like. And so all the things that you sort of place upon yourself when you don't have the education and the knowledge of what to expect, like she felt like a failure. She felt like her baby hated her. She felt like I could never breastfeed, and like the relationship, like all of it, what you're saying, like women's flourishing is very much tied into hormone health, understanding it and just knowing this is normal, because we do tend to like personalize and take things that on as, you know, shameful or worthy of blame, that it's just your hormones.
Yeah. 100%. And I think too, you know, because just going along the pregnancy and delivery theme, this idea that, you know, we're going to have our baby, we're going to deliver our baby, and then we'll move on. You know, there's not as much prep happening. And I would say too, it's probably because the village isn't as strong. When I say village, either metaphorically or actually kind of literally, like what's our community like? Do we have friends that have had a baby before us who can give us tips? Are we the first of our friend circle to have babies? There's this huge like community element that's missing, because in the olden days, women probably would have known because they lived with other women, you know, and their mom lived with them and their grandparents lived with them. And not only that, but they also had people to help care for their child. So I know that's kind of going off on a thing, but I think the same thing is true for hormones and just the way we feel during the cycle, even though maybe hundreds of years ago they couldn't quite explain it, but they had each other. And I think that's what's so great about the Fearless Future conference that you guys are leading, is that it's really what we can do together. And it's us passing this information on, you know, to this generation, but generations to come. So people aren't going to be so clueless, because when we're informed, we're empowered. And when we're not informed, we make desperate choices, and you know, no one wants that. So that's again what I like so much about what you guys are putting together.
We're rebuilding the village.
Right. Yeah.
And I think it's important to pause on this word of empowerment. And that's what we've titled your talk at the conference. You ladies, I don't know if you know this. We haven't really shared it with you, but you were right at the beginning. Like we very intentionally have put you at the beginning of our conference. You know, Leah and I will set things up, of course, but then you were right there, because we want to lead with empowerment. So just give us a very, you know, small teaser. What does it mean? What can it look like to empower women through fertility awareness and hormonal awareness?
Well, I'll go and then Teresa, you can finish. But I like to think about how as women, when we tap into our feminine nature and when we activate, the fabric of our feminine soul, I feel like that is the kind of a step that many people, including myself, often forget to do. And what I mean by that is, before empowering anyone, we want to first think about, how am I going to come across? Am I smiling? Am I calm? Am I happy? Or am I angry and judgmental and mad? You know what I mean? So it's like, first just thinking about, how am I presenting myself? It's difficult to empower anyone if their first impression of you is like a little Scrooge. So that's number one, right? I mean, ladies, so I always think of myself whenever I'm talking to a group or any woman who doesn't know me and they're a stranger. I think to myself, this might be strange. So you're welcome if this is a tip that's helpful, and I'm sorry if this is disturbing. So both could go either way. But I think of them as a stick of butter. I'm like, okay, you are a stick of butter. We don't know each other. So until I notice that you're getting a little soft with our conversation, I'm not going to go in and try to tell you everything about everything, because the trust isn't there. So first step, tap into the feminine genius, tap into just being present with the person you're communicating with, whether it's one person or a group of people. And then the second one is, once trust has been built and they feel like you genuinely have an interest in them, then I feel like you can start asking them, do you know questions, or what if questions? What if there was a way to track your cycle? What if there was a way that you could decrease some of the pain that you've been experiencing? Would you be interested in learning more? So it takes that invitation.
Mm-hmm.
And then it takes, and I'll say one more thing, and then Teresa, I want to hear what you have to say. But also, sometimes for me, I'm very high energy and kind of hyper, and I can get lost in my own world of like happiness. You know what I mean? I'm like, sometimes I become so like socially unaware of how I'm coming across. But it's not telling somebody everything in that moment. It's inviting them to learn more in a time where they can focus and think. And understanding our cycle, that alone not only opens the eyes of the women that we teach, but also opens the eyes of the men. Like the guys, I feel like they're like a missing ingredient that we need to empower more. Speaking of that word, empowerment. Okay, so that's my answer. But Teresa, I'm interested to hear what you're going to say, because you're working with women one-on-one,
Right.
like the patient nurse practitioner thing. So how do you empower women during your appointments?
Oh, I mean, I'll just give you this one example, and it's always a great one. I use this story a lot. It's a woman who came to see me who, when she first came to see me, she would have been a cold, hard stick of butter. Let's put it that way. And, she came to see me, and she was, like we, obviously, like, stereotypes are stereotypes for a reason. So let's just say she was the stereotypical hard woman with a lot of piercings, a lot of tattoos, a lot of energy, that was a certain way. And she was coming to me for help with her menstrual cycles, no doubt. And the conversations in the beginning were, just really trying to kind of establish a relationship, establish trust. Like you said, Jamie, there's a point where like they have to trust you in order to get to the point where they're willing to, kind of understand what you're saying to them. And in the beginning, when I would introduce a topic around like human sexuality and kind of she was living a very promiscuous life. Let's put it that way. And I knew it was hurting her. The pain was all over her face. The pain was in everything she said to me. So in bringing that up to her, it was very much like a brick wall, very much like a brick wall in the beginning. But here's the crazy part. I felt like maybe this woman would never come back and see me ever again. Like I opened up a door to her to say, listen, I just want you to learn about your body at this point. And in order to do that, we got to start kind of having a cycle tracking method. We have to start having some sort of awareness of what's going on in your body. So she started charting her cycles. And sure enough, she came back like 4 months later. And I don't know how to explain this, except that like her demeanor, not just like mentally, but physically, was absolutely different. it was like the awareness of her own body, the ability to kind of now link herself, or like like you say, like attached to her own feminine genius. It changed her within a short amount of time. And then the conversations that we were having were completely different. And I just always think about her because she was empowered. She was empowered by just being able to attach her own identity with how, like her body, like awareness of what was going on. And me being able to kind of just coach her in that changed her entire life. And to this day, I swear, like that woman's relationship with me is so strong. Like when she sees me, and she's gone through a lot still ever since, her relationship with me is so strong because I think I was the first person to say, you can do this. You can advocate for yourself. You have dignity. You have worth. Like there is something deeper here you are missing, and we can find it together if you just let me help you. Yes. And that's empowerment. And that's the type of stories that you get to see where you're like, we know every single woman out there deserves this.
Yeah. And is it just the knowledge of, I know when I'm ovulating, or I know, like, what is it about the fertility cycle that makes a woman feel so powerful? Like, what is it? Is like, what do you think that is? Like that?
That's a great question. And I can explain from my experience, and then I can explain from what I've seen when working with women. But for me, when I started learning about my cycle, and again, it was so convicting that I made it my life's work, that everything is intertwined. Like I was learning how when I'm fertile, I produce cervical fluid, and that means my estrogen levels are high. But not just that. I learned that if you were to take a swab of saliva from my mouth and put it under a microscope, it would look different before ovulation than what it would look like after ovulation. I started noticing like how integrated my body was. Or even after you ovulate, your temperature increases because progesterone makes you a bit warmer. And all of these like very intertwining things. That was like phase 1 of my mind being blown. And again, I didn't know much. I knew the tiniest bit, but when I started really digging in, the second phase was when I started seeing how my mood also aligned with my hormones throughout my cycle. So there may be times when I feel like so lazy and unmotivated and like I don't want to go anywhere. And I would think to myself, man, Jamie, what kind of a woman are you? I mean, put on your big girl panties and get to work. I'd just be like, what on earth is wrong with you? And then when I started realizing, like, oh my gosh, I only really feel that way during a certain time of my cycle. And other times I'm like super energetic and wonderful. So instead of, shaming on myself, I would just be aware and I would choose different activities and wear different clothes. I'll add during those phases of the cycle. So I just see hormones working for us. I think that's the key. It's more than just, again, the cycle. It's helping us with our productivity, our creativity, our relationships. Like we're more emotionally intelligent when we're ovulating. If right now I'm not ovulating, actually, I'm in my luteal phase. But a week ago, so are you, Teresa? Sweet.
Me too.
Oh yeah, who's in the luteal phase? Well, Lisa Kenny is
down
not.
On the loot, Jamie. We're down on the loot.
Down in the loot, you guys. We have to start that as a thing.
Getting a t-shirt.
Conference, we need to explain it. Real quick, at a conference we just went to, there was a gaggle of gals, and they were the sweetest, cutest little gaggle that I've ever seen. And they had a whole language for talking about their cycle. They talked about how they would meet up for their site, like a cycle club, but they called it spin class because of the cycle. And then they talk like after ovulation, they'd be like, yeah, I'm down in the loot, like the luteal phase. Oh, so funny. So
down in the loot. Oh my goodness. Well,
that's revolutionary. Yeah. That's revolutionary. I love it. You think about that this next generation of college age women have these open conversations, have that self-awareness, like have that ability to kind of like give themselves grace and say, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm down in the loot.
And if you can say it with an Australian accent, it's like
Down and
so
blue.
much better even,
Down
you
and
know?
blue.
It's like, I don't even know how to do it, but it's like, I love it so much. I said it just recently on a radio interview and it got people's attention, that's for sure.
This is a small taste of what you can expect at the Fearless Future Conference happening in Orlando, Florida, February 28th through to March 1st. You can get your tickets at fearlessfutureconference.com and hear these incredible women of the Hormone Genius podcast on the stage there. I want to just touch on people who are a frozen stick of butter. So for people who perhaps have been on the birth control pill, let's say, or are reticent to change their mindset at all, that this is a way to, awaken a very powerful part of you. But particularly, like, if someone has been on the pill for their entire adult life, right, or a frozen stick of butter, what have you seen that works with them, both in your practice, Teresa, as well as in, Jamie, the work that you do with coaches?
Yeah, I mean, these are almost my favorite people because it all starts with just, again, establishing trust in a relationship to soften first. But when, I mean, women are very smart, right? They're very intuitive, very smart. And so it does not take very much for them to realize that they know that the birth control that they have been using is suppressing them to some degree, that it isn't their real hormones. Intuitively, they know that. And so when you start talking to them about it, it's no judgment at all. It's more just, hey, gosh, you've been on this particular form of birth control for 10 years. And, let's just talk about what possible ramifications that could have on your body, and if you explain kind of what those hormones are, and then you explain that when they're on those synthetic hormones, that it literally suppresses their own endocrine system. So I always like to say there's an OBGYN very famous out there who's very traditional, but she likes to call the pill the biggest endocrine system disruptor ever.
Yeah.
Right? Because its actual purpose is to disrupt the endocrine system, like hands down. Like that's what its purpose is. And you're going to take that every day as a woman. Now, in general, most people out there are like, gosh, I'd really like to avoid hormones in my meat or hormones in my milk or toxins and stuff like that. So we have a generation of women who are trying to avoid hormone in a bad way. And so when you start to talk about the fact that this pill, this contraceptive, may be actually causing that harm to their body, they get it instantly. And they know, they're like, yes, but what they don't know is they don't know the alternative. And this is where when you share with them what the actual alternative is, then the conversation is beautiful and they can be like, okay, I want to do that. Now, it's not easy because if they're in a situation where they're used birth control to avoid pregnancy, that's a fear situation sometimes, right? But they are very, very open to having the conversation about like the real hormonal them. Like I always say, once we get rid of these synthetic hormones, guess what? Like you get to know the real hormonal you. And that's exciting to them and scary because what if the real hormonal them is crazier than the other hormonal person they know? I mean, it doesn't matter, but like I like get giddy with them in the sense that I'm just like, you guys, like, do you realize like this is going to be like so exciting? You're going to get to know the real hormonal you for the first time. And that sets them on a path to be like, let's do this.
Yeah.
The whole point of our conference is fearless. Like, and you mentioned fear in there, that the fear of pregnancy, that fear decision to take the pill. Is there a version of fertility awareness and natural fertility where you don't fear pregnancy? I mean, can this be compatible with a fearless life?
When I meet with clients, I remember this one time I was meeting with a husband and wife, and I could just tell they weren't 100% sold on charting their cycle. And it was one of our first appointments, maybe their second time coming in. And I could just tell, like they hadn't been completely won over, but they were curious. And I just asked questions. I just asked, what about this interests you? And, oh, it's natural. And I feel kind of crappy on the pill and all these things. I said, okay. I said, so options are we learn about our fertility and natural ways to avoid pregnancy, or we continue doing what you don't like. The choice is yours. I mean, I think it's just, we talk about the word choice, but truly, I mean, if we're giving people all the information, then they can actually make a choice. We're not really saying, oh, this is a choice when they're only given one part of the information and the whole world knows about birth control. Hardly anybody knows about fertility awareness. So we need to give them an actual choice and they get to choose. But I'd say, in terms of like that fear of pregnancy, it's this, it has a deeper roots than just your cycle. It's about the relationship they're in. It's about the relationship they have with themselves. It's about trusting themselves. It's so much more than just the cycle. And I think that might be why sometimes it's hard at times to chart your cycle, because it's like taking a rug that hasn't been cleaned in a while and then floofing it around in the air and all the particles are up and they're disturbed. It's kind of like one of those. So if there's a lot going on in that marriage, it can be hard. But again, a very important turning point, hopefully, in that relationship where they can really understand what true intimacy is. I think that's the other thing too. With Creighton, so I'm trained as a fertility care practitioner, we talk about this acronym called SPICE. And it's areas of intimacy that lead to actual better intercourse and sex. But without sex, you can still be intimate in spiritual ways, physical ways, intellectual ways, creative and communicative ways, and emotional ways. And at first, when I learned that acronym, I thought that's a big old yawn. Like, I mean, that seems fine. I don't know. But it ended up being one of my favorite things, like to talk about with couples. It became a challenge. So main point, we don't want to paint a picture where it's always easy, but I think it's necessary and it's important, not just for their physical health, but also for their relationship with others and the relationship with themselves.
So good. Such good stuff here.
Yeah. A big part of our conference that we want people to walk away with is a sense of, I'm a part of a movement. I'm a part of something bigger than just myself. And we're trying to revolutionize many things. And I know for both of you personally, it's how women, like we've talked about in this conversation, how women are looking at themselves. It sounds like that's at the heart of it. The relationship with themselves is very important to both of you. So for anyone listening who might just be, again, curious, okay, like, I'm buying what you're selling, Hormone Podcast ladies. Like, I'm intrigued. I'm curious. How can they take a next step?
Well, they can start by, I mean, the podcast has so much information. It really is a foundation to become your own hormone genius. So the mission of the Hormone Genius podcast is to empower women to become the genius of their own hormones. It is not about Jamie and I claiming to be hormone geniuses. It is literally about putting out the biology, the science, the truth of their own feminine design and letting them become the genius of their own hormones. And what we know, just like that gaggle of girls that came to us as Hormone Genius fangirls at this, huge conference, is that it does. Because what did they do? They listened to some of our podcasts and then they started their own cycle club. So it's like, it doesn't have to be that, but it could be 1,000 other things. If you feel called in this movement, it might be, you might become a fertility care practitioner or be a hormone coach or help people to chart their cycles. You might just become a genius yourself of your own hormones and feel so good about your relationship with yourself, your own marriage, your own children, that ripple effect might help other families that are close to you as well. Like, we know good, healthy, strong relationships, they have a ripple effect across the world. And really, that is the building block of all civilizations, is marriage and family. So this supports that, right? And so, it could look 1,000 different ways, but if you just are like, you've just touched the beginning of my heart, just listen to the podcast. Jamie and I say it all the time on the podcast. If you are like feeling something, Jamie calls it out all the time. Just email us. I mean, and we've got Dr. Marguerite Duane all the time was like, she'll put any soldier to work anytime in the area of fertility awareness. Like if you are feeling called, we will direct you to the people in some way. So this is a movement. It's an enlightenment. It is a community of women, but men too, that want to see hope, positiveness, like something that we can do together that really builds people up in a positive way. So that's how I want it to be.
Leah, I got to ask you a question because I want to hear your answer. How do empowered women change the world?
Oh my gosh.
I know. I'm ready. Are you all ready? It's going to be good.
No. I mean, I think Teresa was just right on right there. That ripple effect. Empowered women raise empowered daughters. Empowered women become empowered mothers. They become mentors. They become leaders. In every sphere of society, empowered women lean in fully as themselves. And that's what we desperately need in this world. We need that feminine energy infused everywhere, every sphere of society. And empowered women take a seat at the table. They know I'm good. There's nothing wrong with me. Like, my body's not the problem. I'm equal. I'm just as smart as you are. I live in the same place you live. Like, we don't, like just these ideas, like the whole thing that we were talking about earlier about how we shame ourselves, we blame ourselves when we don't know any better. And when we know better, we do better. We understand I'm not the problem. Like, I belong here. My voice matters. And if we can do that by teaching women to track their cycles, if we can get women like of that caliber by telling her as a little girl, like, this is good and beautiful and there's nothing wrong with it, it's healthy. I mean, that's how you change the world.
There's an important dot I want to just connect, and something you said earlier, Teresa, that what if you could meet your true hormonal self? And I just want to make that very practical for people, because if you have a time in your cycle where you're not a pleasant person to be around, or you make poor decisions, or you're more emotional, or whatever, enter XYZ, I'm sure we can all think of something, right? But you're not aware of maybe why it's happening, or no one's ever told you there are things that you can do, both from a nutrition point of view, from just a scheduling point of view, from, all these different things to support you during that time. If nobody's told you that, you could live a great, you could live a life of great condemnation. You could tell yourself all kinds of stories that are true. Imagine, again, we're connected with that true hormonal self. We start to understand, okay, I have this awareness now. I have this education. I can do things to support myself, and I'm not going to live this story that just doesn't exist. That's what intrigues me the most. Like, imagine that women, instead of telling themselves false stories, instead just started showing up as themselves. That's kind of amazing, right?
100%.
Ladies, we can talk all night long, but anything else that you want to add on this topic of empowering women through fertility awareness? You're going to add to this at our conference, February 28th, the Fearless Future Conference in Orlando, Florida. You can get your ticket at fearlessfutureconference.com. But anything else you want to add on this topic of empowerment?
I'll say something that I wanted to say earlier and I forgot, but just like we are part of this new wave of feminism, this new movement in women's healthcare, what's happening is the medical community truly is also kind of riding the wave that we're hoping that they're going to ride. And when I say that, I mean that now the vital sign, our cycle is seen as a vital sign of health now. That didn't used to be the case. I think that was like in 2019 or something. ACOG now identifies the cycle as a vital sign of health. What does that now mean for us? Well, that now means there's more attention. That now means that learning this information hopefully will be easier. And also, Leah, to go back to the question you asked before about being afraid, like fearful of achieving maybe pregnancy, or, how to track and use these cycles effectively. There's femtech. femtech, and it's kind of a newer, evolving area of fertility awareness, but also just fertility and hormone testing that gives us more information about the state of our hormone health. And so, again, I think that we're just approaching a new era. And so it's a perfect time to jump into the movement now, because I think that, some of these advances are on our side, and they should have been made years and years and years ago. But because, right, women are like, I'm done with the pill. I'm done with the IUD. I'm done with the shots, the patches. I want better for myself. And I think, Leah, you said this, when you create demand, when we start creating noise and we want better for ourselves, especially when we go to the doctor, that's really as well how things start moving and changing.
Yeah, I love the work you're doing. You guys are making enough noise that you're getting ladies excited about knowing their true hormonal selves. That's really just an incredible gift you're giving to society and culture.
Teresa, any final words? Anything else you want to add?
No, I'm just honored to be a guest and to be a speaker at the Fearless Future Conference coming up. So I just encourage all those who are listening to please join us. It will be a very informative, but also a very fun event. Part of it's just networking and, again, creating community. The more we work together, the more we spread this across the world. So very grateful that you have asked Jamie and I to be a part of it, and we're excited to join you.
And
it is going to be fun. It's going to be so much fun. It is always fun when we're together. It's going to be a lot of fun.
And it's going to be so great, because what we're really doing at this conference is taking this base knowledge that you guys started out with, that these hormones are life. All of women's life is hormones. And we're going to talk about the lifespan of women. Like, we're going to talk about that our hormones shift, as we grow and as we age, and that in order for it to be women's health care, it has to have a base understanding of that. So one of the main points of this conference is really going to be to connect the dots of a woman's lifespan, and her hormonal story is that thread that you pull throughout a woman's life. So, that you're still yourself when you're ovulating you, and your postpartum you, and your perimenopausal you, and your postmenopausal you, like you're you and you're good. And your hormonal journey and your pathway can make it much easier. So that's a big part of this conference, is it's all intertwined and connected. And Jamie, like you said before, it affects one another, the integration of all of that,
Mm-hmm.
Negative experiences as a 12-year-old girl not understanding her hormonal cycle can affect you as a 38-year-old perimenopausal woman that never learned to trust her body. Like, we have to connect the dots when we don't give this knowledge, how it affects us throughout our entire life.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Oh my gosh, can we please do an episode about perimenopause? And I would like to unload the weird thoughts I've had. Like, I've had so many weird thoughts about myself during perimenopause. Oh my God.
Oh, you are pregnant, my dear. You can't quite be in perimenopause. You're pregnant.
Whatever I'm feeling. I very quickly, and then we will wrap up. But like, I literally was like, I'm in perimenopause. And I think I still was, or am, or whatever, but they were also pregnancy. Like, it was just, there was a good period where I was like, Lisa Canning has left. There's no Lisa Canning left. There's this absolutely mad woman.
You are
I deal with perimenopause every day of my life in my practice. So you name the day and we can talk about perimenopause all day, because I got it every day of my life in my practice. So I know every up and down which way it can go.
Teresa, what is the technical term for Lisa? She would be a geriatric grand multiparous, great grand multiparous.
Yeah, definitely grand multiparous. That's for sure. Yeah, it's an award. It's a crown, and you should wear it and be proud of it, girl.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. If you like this conversation, you will hear lots more of it at the Fearless Future Conference in Orlando. Grab your tickets at fearlessfutureconference.com. Jamie and Teresa, thank you so much. And we are honored to have you and to be linking arms with you. The work that you are doing is just, it's admirable what you have built. You have built such a community and such a movement. And we're just so proud to link arms with you on this project and many others. You've been such a friend to Guiding Star over the years. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Fearless Future Podcast.